For our first webinar in our Manufacturing a Greener Future series. And today we're going to look at an introduction to sustainability. I'm Greg Cranston. I work within NMIS. I'm part of the Manufacturing Skills Academy that's bringing you these webinars today as part of supporting our online training content. And I'll talk a little bit about what's available and support for your companies in the coming couple of slides. Just before I get started, a little bit of housekeeping. The webinar is being recorded and will be made available on our YouTube channel. And your microphones and your webcams will be turned off during the session to avoid any background noise. So if you've got any questions, feel free to type them in through the chat tool and I'll pick them up towards the end of the session today. And if you want to post on any of our socials, please use that hashtags listed on the screen and our Twitter group there as well. So as we mentioned, this is the first webinar in our Manufacturing a Greener Future series. We've got two follow-on webinars, so if you're not already signed up, you can find these using the links that you used to sign up for this session. We've got Industry 5.0 and its role in sustainable manufacturing early in January there on the 11th. And we've got the life cycle analysis, Path to a Greener Future webinar on Wednesday, the 8th of February. They're all running at the same time as today's session, so hopefully you'll be able to join us to follow through the series to its conclusion. Both this series of webinars are supported by the Advancing Manufacturing Challenge Fund and the Extend project. These projects are funded by Scottish Government and the European Regional Development Fund. So today's webinar, an introduction to sustainability, will give you an introduction to the concepts of net zero and sustainability in a manufacturing environment. They will highlight the importance of sustainability in digital manufacturing future and how that can affect your businesses. We'll see some examples from government, from industry and from businesses and how they're transitioning to that net zero future. And your speakers today are Professor David Butler from the University of Strathclyde and the Extend project, and my colleague Jennifer Griffiths from NMIS MSA. Jennifer's our skills project lead on net zero. So just before we move into the main body of the session, as I mentioned, we wanted to highlight some of the additional support that's available to you through the Manufacturing Skills Academy. The reasons behind our webinar series today is to highlight our skills CPD training that we have online, and we've got a range of digital and advanced manufacturing topics, but also obviously including a range of content around sustainability and net zero. So if you want to learn more after today's session, feel free to explore our website and join our platform to access any of the content to build your knowledge on these topics. You can find that through the nmis.scotland website, or indeed you just drop me an email and I will give you access to our platform where you can find that content for you. So in addition to the online training content, we've got a lot of one-to-one support that's available as well. We can do that in a consultation. We've got a range of different workshops that we can bring out to your businesses as well. And some of the topics that we're looking at just now are in continuous improvement, remanufacturing, design and innovation, and equality, diversity and inclusion. Again, we're happy to create some bespoke workshops to suit the needs of your business. So if anybody is interested in exploring what's available, again, feel free to drop me an email. And in addition to the support I've outlined above, we can also signpost you to further organisations that can provide additional support and additional training as required. As I mentioned, we've got an extensive network there of additional support. These are our One Scotland partners that help support NMIS. And as I say, we're happy to broker introductions to any of these partners to access support that's not available under the NMIS umbrella. And I'm not going to take any more of your time today. I'm going to pass you on to your presenters. After all, that's what everybody's here to hear. So as I mentioned, if there's anything that I can do, feel free to drop me an email. My email's on the screen, and I will hand you over to Jennifer Griffiths to get this underway. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Greg. All right, I'll start sharing my screen. Remember how to do this. Okay, can everyone see that? Fab, thank you. Okay, so hi there. My name's Jennifer Griffith. Thanks for coming along today. I'm the skills project lead for the transition to net zero here in this. This presentation is the first of the three-part series, which will explore manufacturing for a greener future. Okay, so I said I'm part of NMIS. NMIS is a large organisation with partnerships throughout Scotland. We have 3 main buildings. I'm based at the big purple one at NMIS HQ as part of the Manufacturing Skills Academy. We also have 2 other sites that you're likely to have heard of, the Advanced Forming Research Centre and the Lightweight Manufacturing Centre. Okay, so the title of the presentation I was asked to do today was Introduction to Sustainability, but early on in creating these slides, I decided that I don't want so much to give you guys an introduction to sustainability as much as I want to give you a grounding in it. But let's make sure we're all on the same page when we start talking. Even in literature, specific definitions of sustainability are difficult to agree on. In the broadest sense, sustainability refers to the ability to maintain or support a process continuously over time. So when I say I want to give you a grounding in sustainability, it's because I know that many of you will have heard of terms out there that you don't know if they're out of date and if they're still relevant. So what's the history of them? Where did terms come from? Was it a credible source, and are they being implemented at a global, national, or organizational level? What's its context, and ultimately, which parts matter to you? There's also a distinction to be made between sustainability and sustainable development. The Brundtland Commission puts it best when they say sustainable development is development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. And UNESCO has this to say that they make a good distinction between the two. The difference between concepts is that sustainability is a long-term goal towards a more sustainable world, whereas sustainable development implies the process to reach this goal. I interpreted that as sustainable development being a cog that we can use to drive sustainability forwards. And because I'm a very visual thinker, you'll see a lot of this motif today. So part of the mechanism of how we drive sustainable development is that it's a comprehensive strategy that considers the ecological, social, and economic elements, realizing that every aspect needs to be taken into account to achieve lasting success. Okay, so another hugely important topic we're going to touch on today is the field of climate change. What is climate change? Well, it refers to the long-term shifts in temperatures and weather patterns. These shifts may be natural, but since the 1800s, human activities have been the main driver of climate change, primarily due to the burning of fossil fuels like coal, oil, and gas, which produces heat-trapping gases. One of the most prominent mechanisms used to positively impact climate change is net zero. Simply put, net zero refers to the balance between the amount of greenhouse gases produced and the amount removed from the atmosphere. We reach net zero when the amount of greenhouse gases we add is no more than the amount taken away. So these are the 4 main topics I'll be talking about today, which give you a good grounding for the rest of the presentations in this series, Manufacturing a Greener Future. Okay, so a little bit of history. So we're going to take a whirlwind tour of the past 50 years for progress towards sustainable development and limiting climate change. I'm going to go over this quite quickly, but the webinar is being recorded, so you'll be able to see it again. And if you want a copy of the slides, you can just put that into the comments as well. So we're going to start with 1972, so the world's first conference to make the environment a major issue. One of the major results for that, from that was the Stockholm Conference, was the creation of the United Nations Environment Programme. In the 80s, we saw the publication of the Brundtland Report, from which I quoted earlier, and to help direct nations of the world towards the goal of sustainable development. It focused primarily on the needs and interests of humans, was concerned with securing a global equity for future generations by redistributing resources towards poorer nations to encourage economic growth. It highlighted the 3 I have to put that down 1 second. It highlighted the 3 fundamental components of sustainable development: the environment, the economy, and society. This decade also saw the establishment of the IPCC, the International Panel on Climate Change, which you'll also see a lot about the place. They're very important. Lots of things were happening in the 90s. There's the World Earth Summit. It received 155 signatories agreeing to its targets under the United Framework Convention on Climate Change, also a big deal, the Convention on Biodiversity, and the Declaration of Principles of Forest Management. Towards the end of the decade, we also get the first greenhouse gas reduction treaty from COP3 in Kyoto. You'll have heard of it likely as the Kyoto Protocol. I want to highlight that this wouldn't have been possible with those agreements from organisations being in place from the previous 2 decades, allowing research funding, publications, and therefore targets to get more advanced. The UNFCCC website states that, in short, the Kyoto Protocol operationalizes the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change by committing industrialized countries and economies in transition to limit and reduce greenhouse gas emissions in accordance with agreed individual targets. So what that says to me is we're starting to see equitable shares of responsibility. A quick side note, what do I mean by equity? I personally think this comic explains it best. Some nations have advantages, and we need to address how to bring everyone up to the same level so they're all able to get the same vision and meet the same goals. That often takes the form of funding for sustainable development programs in poorer nations and different targets dependent on the global impacts of nations and industries. So, moving on, we see COP15 in 2009 being an agreement between signatories to keep global warming between 2 degrees. We also see the UN Millennium Development Goals introduced, and the influential book Cradle to Cradle is published. The UK is the first country to set legally binding emissions targets for 2050. At that time, it was set to 80% of pre-industrial levels under the UK Climate Act. The 2000s see the Millennium Development Goals being built on, and now we see the UN Sustainable Development Goals. So if you've ever heard those 2 terms and not sure how they relate or which one's relevant, it's now UN Sustainable Development Goals, and they'll be in effect until 2030. My personal saviour and icon, Ellen MacArthur, starts operating the Ellen MacArthur Foundation in this decade, and the Paris Agreement, so almost all the world's nations, for the first time, support a common strategy to cut greenhouse gas emissions, which cause global warming to go below 2 degrees above pre-industrial levels, and continue efforts to limit that warming to 1.5, because a lot of experts agree that 2 degrees is just not good enough. And the UK Climate Change Act is amended not to just reach 80% of the reduction in emissions, but now it's saying net zero. So it's got now a framework broken down by sector and how it is that we intend to get there. Okay, so moving up to the present, we've got Glasgow at COP26, the creation of the International Sustainability Standards Board. I think you're going to be hearing more of these in the sector. It was an initiative to develop standards that require companies to provide all material information related to significant sustainability matters that are relevant to investors' decision-making. So that's including thematic and industry-based requirements. For me, that says it's trying to develop a global baseline of sustainability disclosures to meet the needs of financial investors and limit greenwashing. That to me is kind of the takeaway there. Okay, so we've just done a whirlwind of the last 50 years, but what about the next 28 years, 1 month and 2 days, until we have legally binding targets in 2050? Many of you might know that the UK has net zero ambition for 2050, as do countries who've committed to the Paris Agreement. While Scotland has announced its ambition to achieve this 5 years earlier in 2045, there are a lot of interim targets along the way. And some of the most notable policies that will help us reach these goals are the ban of new sales of petrol and diesel cars from 2030. 2032 sees the retrofit heating solutions to be net zero ready, and the NHS is to be net zero by 2040. Okay, so we've spoken about a few of the COPs, some significant publications and organisations, but how does this affect you? There's the global level. There's global commitments and initiatives to promote change in institutional, economic and financial models, such as the UN Sustainable Development Goals and the Paris Climate Change Agreement we've mentioned. There's the European level. The EU Action Plan on Sustainable Finance aims to integrate environmental, social, and government considerations into the financial framework policy. That's building off of Brundtland Commission way back in the 80s. And on a national level, we see that the UK's Build Back Greener strategy and Scotland's climate change plan, including its policy for a just transition to net zero. At the sector level, we see that national strategies create targets by each sector and roadmaps of how to get there. This applies to both public and private sectors. At an organisational level, if your company does not fall under the SECR, the Streamlined Energy and Carbon Reporting Scheme, then you may sign up to a net zero pledge. There are benefits and incentives to do so for reputation, marketing, and remaining competitive if you're not one of those larger companies. So I'm just going to pick out a couple of the things I really want to highlight from that timeline and how they're really still very relevant now and will continue to be so. So they are the UN Sustainable Development Goals and the Environmental, Social and Governance Standards. So UN Sustainability Goals, all United Nations member countries endorse the 2030 goals, creating a universal framework for lasting global peace and prosperity. It's a 15-year plan centered on 17 development goals and require immediate attention by all countries on a multilateral framework. These include social, ecological, and economic goals. I don't have time to go into all of these today, but they are a comprehensive blueprint on how to achieve a better and more sustainable future for all. I would recommend looking into them very much so. And forgive me for a small plug here, but there is an upcoming course from the MSA website which explores each of these in more detail. One of the three aspects of sustainable development is economics. International investors with global investment portfolios are increasingly calling for high quality, transparent, reliable, and comparable reporting by companies on climate change and other environmental, social, and governance ESG matters. To achieve this, it was announced at COP26 in Glasgow that a new standard setting board, the International Sustainability Standards Board, ISSB, would be created to help meet this demand. The intention is for the ISSB to deliver a comprehensive global baseline for sustainability-related disclosure standards that provide investors and other capital market participants with information about companies' sustainability-related risks and opportunities to help them make informed decisions. Okay, so now a quick look at the context on a national level from a wee triangle here. We've got the global goals, the European goals. Now we're looking at Scotland. So in 2007, the Scottish Government introduced the National Performance Framework. It has evolved to incorporate those SDGs, and it's Scotland's way to localise them and make them more relevant to the people of Scotland. That's what this diagram here shows. It's the SDGs are most pertinent to Scotland's future ambitions. They place a strong emphasis on reducing inequality. What does that look like? I would encourage everyone to visit the globalgoals.scot. It's the home of the Sustainable Development Goals Network in Scotland, and it's an alliance of over 200 partners working together to promote the objectives in this country and throughout the world. Okay, how does this affect me? So you know what the targets are by different parts of the UK. And we're trying to limit to under 1.5. So why do we want that? This graph shows the impact of flooding in the UK. On the left is the 2017 baseline, and the right shows the UK climate projections 2009 high emissions scenario. How many homes, businesses, and agricultural lands do we expect to be prone to flooding if we fail to reach net zero? Here's a little bit more zoomed in. It's a study done by earth.org that shows the low emission scenario versus the high emission scenario. The fact is that it is too late to stop environmental impacts of climate change, but we can still limit how much harm is done. You can see here that the map shows an estimated 34% of the people in Newport region are very vulnerable to displacement. That's 60,000 people whose homes and businesses surrounding infrastructure are set to be at high floods risk by 2100, this study mapped up to. This scenario will be, of course, playing throughout the UK and globally. Oh, did I have to press? There we go. Cool. So that report showed that an estimated 34% of the population is going to be displaced. The UK is already really short on housing stock. What happens when people living in flood-prone areas might not be able to insure their homes, when they're repeatedly displaced and have to move to other communities? That's not to mention the loss of arable land or the loss of biodiversity. The point I'm trying to make here is not just I want to kind of doom everyone. It's that yes, net zero is going to cost a lot of money. That's a common thing that we hear in this industry. But how much will it cost not to? So how do we reach net zero? It comes down to factors that push governments, businesses, and individuals forwards, such as SECR and ESG mandatory reporting frameworks for large companies, and the pull factors such as the desire to exploit new opportunities that help those big fish reach their targets. So large companies have mandatory reporting, and that makes them want to choose smaller companies that help them meet those targets. So if you're a small company and you can show that you've got sustainability credentials, then they're more likely to choose you. There are pledges I would be recommending to start on that, which help you manage, measure, and monitor in order to prove that your sustainability targets and actions are credible. Okay, so what does net zero involve? There are 3 scopes that all companies reporting on their carbon emissions are looking at. Scope 1 involves those emissions that directly created by your business, facilities that you own or control, such as emissions from petrol, diesel vehicles, or inefficient lighting and heating in your building. These include upgrading transport fleets and providing infrastructure, such as EV charging points, providing support, promote working staff, and reduce staff travel, invest in energy efficient products, reduce water consumption and wastage, reduce the wastage, increase the percentage recycled in your business, and speaking to your facilities managers, buildings owners about achieving those targets. Scope 2 involves emissions indirectly created by your use of fossil fuel generated energy. It's perhaps the easiest one to tackle from a commercial business's perspective because it means switching over to an energy provider with a green energy tariff. I would, although very much recommend that you check the breakdown of the energy sources to make sure it's come directly from 100% renewable energy sources. Not all of them are created equal, but you can always find it in the breakdowns that they provide. Scope 3 emissions involve those indirectly created by your supply chain. They're often the most substantial area a business can impact. In fact, they often account for more than 70% of businesses' carbon footprint. So Scope 3 calls for the review of supply chains and considers more sustainable alternatives. Potential ways to achieve this are developing local supply chains that lower your transport emissions, increase your supply chain resilience, and provide a buffer between you and global shocks, such as a pandemic or it's a ship getting stuck in a canal, stopping a lot of trade coming through. Review your products to see if they can be designed more efficiently, including non-destructive design features and sourcing of more eco-friendly raw materials. What I can mean by that is things that can be repaired and don't use nearly as many virgin materials. Consider alternative business models under the circular economy and increase your business abilities to provide products as a service or an aftermarket support service. Okay, mechanisms. What are the strategies and conceptual frameworks? So I've spoken about climate change and net zero, plus sustainability and sustainable development. Kate Raworth's famous donut model from her book, Donut Economics, envisions these concepts as systems inside one another. Sustainable development sets the social foundation that we should not fall below, in that middle of the donut, and includes the health and education of all people. And there is an ecological ceiling for activities that negatively impact our environment and climate change that we need to stay below. Humanity's safe, sustainable space is in the middle of these 2 forces. Here's the unadulterated model. I highly recommend reading Kate Raworth's book for much deeper and eloquent explanation of all these concepts. Another prominent mechanism is the circular economy, which I've mentioned before and promoted into the zeitgeist by St. Ellen MacArthur, personal saint. The tools of repair, reuse, and remanufacture and recycle are all solutions for businesses and people to meet their sustainability and climate change ambitions. David is going to be explaining this to you in more detail and give you some great case studies. I would also recommend checking out the programme David is involved in. You can find it at extend.scot. It provides practical tools and fully funded sessions for SMEs. So if all this sounds quite high level conceptual to you, this is about tools to break down what is relevant in your business. And you can find more about that on the website. And something I haven't touched on at all today, but it's a piece that the digital revolution is going to play in all of this. At its highest level, having connected smart devices contributing information to central hubs will allow us to be much more efficient with our energy. It could tell councils if a bin that's fill level, the temperature and locations. They don't have to take unnecessary trips to collect it or schedule additional ones. Or in agriculture, you can place inexpensive sensors in the soil which measure parameters such as hydration, nutrition, disease in real time. This data can be subsequently used to form adaptive irrigation systems, which determine most efficient watering patterns. These are two examples that I've taken out of thousands that are potential, but it will be looked at more in our next session on the 11th of December called Industry 5.0 and its role in the sustainable manufacturing. Okay, so that's me. I'm going to be handing over to David, but if you have any questions, feel free to contact me via my email or on LinkedIn. All right, over to you.
Thank you. Perfect timing. Let's hope I can keep to the time as well. I guess you need to stop sharing.
There you go.
Thanks. Right, I assume I'm sharing already. Just need to see myself on the screen, which is always not a good thing to do. So bear with me, this is the problem having too many screens. You have to get yourself set up correctly and it never works. Right. Anyway, thank you, Jen. You just got a good feeling for why we are trying to look into the circular economy. Sorry, why into sustainability as a whole. And the circular economy is just one part of that, which is gaining a lot of attention. So what I do is I lead a project called Extend, which is between Strathclyde and NMIS. And we actually go out, it's fully funded, we go to SMEs to help them in Scotland on their journey towards trying to reduce their carbon footprint, trying to move towards net zero. We're not promising we can do overnight, never happens like that, but at least start the whole process and help companies understand where they are and where they want to get to. And as Jennifer just mentioned, it's going to come down from the big companies are going to say, look, we need to reduce our carbon emissions. And it's what we call scope 3. They're going to push it down onto their supply chain. So we need to get the supply chain ready, and it does become an advantage. I mentioned before in previous webinars, it's very similar to ISO 9000. When the main companies got it, they forced their supply chain to also get it, otherwise lose business. So in exactly the same situation here, it's going to be something which is going to be top down if we're not careful and become reactionary. So hopefully this works. Click. Right. So we talk about circular economy. There are many definitions out there. It's actually about 114, and that's not a tongue-in-cheek statement. I'll show you. Actually, there's an academic paper with that in the title. But they're all basically capturing the same kind of key elements, which is there's a need to change how we do things. Our usual production, which is the linear economy, is not going to be sustainable. We need to think about the impact on the environment. And also now there's more developed countries going after the same resources. How can we do it? How can we get more resources? Unlikely. So it's really about the natural resources we got. How do we extend? How do we make use of them again and again and try to keep it? So one of the terms being thrown around a lot is green shoring, keeping jobs in the country and using the carbon footprint as one of the elements to justify why do it here and not overseas and ship it across. So because of normally linear economy is taking some raw materials, processing it, and at the end we produce waste. And we produce lots of kind of wastes. It could be heat, it could be excess material, or at the end of life of a product, how we dispose of it. And this clearly is not the way to go forward. And I joked about many definitions. Somebody actually wrote a paper talking about 114 definitions of circular economy. So that's something which has never been standardized. So it's one of those things you can present it how you want, which is not good. But all of them, like I said, have that commonality about the fact that we are trying to make reuse of things, but how well we can do it is a matter of time and a matter of capabilities. Sorry, this is wordy, but as Jen said, the slides we made available. I appreciate the basic law of physics, that light travels faster than sound, so you can read it quicker than me if I'm talking it through. But really, a circular economy is about regenerating and restoring and making sure we get better at how we do things. If we look at the design of products, a lot of products, even now, haven't been, coming to the market, have not been designed for the end of life. For example, how do you strip down a motor? Take the parts out, reuse it. Usually they're made for production, so productivity, so things are snap fitted together, not designed to do that. But there is a new law out in the UK called the right to repair, which is now forcing manufacturers to relook at design of certain products and think, how can I make it easier for the consumer to take it apart? I heard some survey that most washing machines fail because of a 50p washer, and we scrap them because we don't understand how to repair them or don't have the knowledge. So you can imagine how many washing machines could have been back into service just by simply replacing one part. Instead, it's a massive environmental issue. So we're looking at the transfer, and this is one of the things which, it's easy to say, our circular economy is brilliant, everyone should do it. But we're so embedded into the linear economy, it's not an overnight change. Unless you're starting a new company with the idea from the beginning, most industries will need time to adapt and even have to justify, is it the way to go forward? In the recent debates over who should be the leader of the Conservative Party, it was the question asked, do you believe in our net zero goals? And some of the politicians were saying no if it loses jobs. So is taking the moral high ground is one thing, but we've got to be pragmatic. Is it something we can do easily, or is it going to have a big impact on businesses? So when we look at the transformation, it's really about preserving and enhancing natural capital. How can we take the stocks the consumables we purchase, how can we extend the life? How can we balance and, where possible, look at alternative supplies, something which is renewable? So the simplest one we'd look at is energy. And that's usually a starting point, which is the Scope 1 emissions, which Jennifer talked about. But going forward, we've got to think more about the circulation. How do we get things back? Hence the circular economy. Is it the whole products? Is it the parts? Is it just the raw materials? Can we somehow reprocess them? And I put down here both technical and biological cycles, because admittedly, a lot of things we do, we can learn more from nature than trying to reinvent the wheel. As we get better at this, we start designing our systems better. So we could design our manufacturing processes to consume low energy, choice of materials could be more environmentally friendly, and like I said earlier, the design could change. So like I said, it's not overnight, it takes time to go through this whole process of moving to a fully circular economy, and no one expects you to do it in one day. Jennifer alluded to the Ellen MacArthur Foundation. This is not theirs, they copied it off somebody else, but it's a book called Cradle to Cradle. Normally you talk cradle to grave, beginning of the product, end of the life of the product. Cradle to cradle is to force you to think that things are circular. And we have two, this is called the butterfly model. We have two parts to it. The left-hand side is more the natural. So you've got the biochemicals, you've got the biosphere, farming, etc. For manufacturing, it's the right-hand side. And Jennifer talked about some of the ways what we can do, what's classed as circular economy. It could be taking the product at the end of life, recycling it, and using the raw materials back in as feedstock back into the process. Or as you can see here, we've also got the challenge of maintaining, which is probably more of an interesting one. How do you prolong the life of a product? Now, that's only going to keep it going for so much longer, but it can extend the life. I'll give you some simple examples. In Scotland, we have lots of wind turbines around. Typically, they have a lifetime of 20 years. And that's mainly because of the way they're sold at the beginning. The warranties are even shorter, but they're actually sold with an expected lifetime of 20 years. After that, you need to think what to do with them. Do you take them down, or do you repower them, or so on? but we can see a potential there to extend the life. And that would be a lot of people would not be very happy having those wind turbines, which they thought would have disappeared, extending for another 20 years. But it's a kind of product we can look at and how to give that guarantee and confidence. We can go on. And it happens with cars, it happens with lots of things where we try to sweat the asset, I guess is a nice phrase to use, to get better life out of it. And that's the simplest thing to do. But going forward, that only takes you so far. We can look at other techniques as well, such as remanufacturing. And we'll go through those quickly in a kind of definition table. A nice way to describe it, I found this graphic, is linear economy, finished to the bin. Recycling, you prolong that journey to the waste by making better use of it. In the circular economy, the waste bin ideally should be empty, but of course there's always some waste. But ideally, it should never go. The majority of the stuff should never go to the waste bin. So nice, simple graphic, but it does sum up the kind of economies we are looking at. And for some reason, my clicker's joined. Okay, got it. Why are we doing all this? Mounting waste. We've got landfill taxes going up for companies every year, so it's becoming prohibitive to just dump things in the ground. As Jennifer's talked about, climate change, the whole policies are changing. People are becoming more aware of it, especially when you can see parts of Wales going underwater in the projections Jennifer showed. And all the stuff about the various international conferences we had. Just had COP27 in Egypt, and of course COP26 had its own target set, and constantly we're setting targets. Now it's more about, I think COP27 was more about the developing world saying, don't preach to us what to do. As the developed world's already made all the mistakes, give us money so we don't have to go for the same pains as you did. And I think that's where it's now changing from nice statements to being something a bit more practical and trying to enact some of these Paris Protocol and Paris Agreement and the Glasgow statements into something which is actually deliverable. Now, as a company, this is from Zero Waste Scotland. So we haven't really talked about Zero Waste Scotland, but it's one of the best sources of information, and they are brilliant at some of their schemes. They've got things like the Green Champion to help companies on a journey. They have a whole set of training to take an individual in a company onto that journey. So we ask them, we asked Zero Waste Scotland, how do you embrace circular economy? Well, there's a few steps. We can look at the design, thinking how to make the product easier to take apart, or add a material which we can do something with. So modular products are coming out a lot more. The most common one we probably use without thinking about it is photocopiers. Nobody sells photocopiers. It's a service industry, and the design is modular, so the company can take parts out, replace them, and extend the life. So thinking about the design of complex equipment or even simple equipment to extend its life is one of the ways we do it. And also at the end of life, how do we get the extract the value back out of it? So this is some of the stuff which you can do, but design is usually, it's hindsight. Later on we do it. At the moment, it's you usually start and say, these are our current products. What can we do in the immediate time frame? So we can reuse and repair, and this is something which, like I said, there's a new law on right to repair. We try and encourage this more. 3D printers have been quite a leveler to many sectors where you can print, download the designs for replacement parts, print at home and do it yourself. So that's starting to create another movement, and this is linked to the maker movement on how to actually do things yourself up to the quality you need. We talk about recycling, and some of you know already that I do a lot of work on aircraft decommissioning, and one of the companies is saying we're doing 85% recycling of our aircraft. And when you ask the question, how do you recycle the interiors? Oh, we shred it and we burn it off. And by burning it, we've recycled the material into energy. So recycling is one of those terms which is a catch-all phrase, but you really got to be careful. How are you actually doing the recycling? Is it something which is, you can put your hand on your heart and say, this is helping the environment, or is it just helping our bottom line? And as we go through the next 10, 20 years, auditing is going to take more and more emphasis in companies, and you're going to find burning things off as energy will probably become a no-no before long. We can look at how we manufacture the products. One of the things we can easily do is put energy monitors on machines and work on how to optimize the manufacturing process just so the first pass to reduce your energy consumption, and then think how we can actually look at the whole process of assembly, take apart, and even the processes to make it even more sustainable. So there's different steps we can do. And remanufacturing and reuse, we have the Scottish Institute of Remanufacturing, based in Glasgow, which provides advice, and also we have toolkits which actually help companies if you want to remanufacture. Now, remanufacture is when you take a part, you check it, you repair it, or you restore it back to its original condition, and you guarantee it. So it's as good as new, or sometimes even better, because you find out how it failed, if it did, and you've improved the product. So remanufacturing is a very good way to keep the life in the product and keep the value, which is also, of course, makes a very good business statement. And the last part really is the business models. How do you switch from selling products to providing the products as a service? So you could be leasing it, or it could be a servitization model, which has been taken up by quite a few industries. And we'll go through some examples shortly on those. So end of life decisions. So I'm going to skip through this, but these are just some of the choices we have. We can remanufacture something, give all the guarantees, recondition it, which is a bit cheaper, but still provide some confidence that the part can last. Or we can just repair it. A particular part of the product's failed. We just quickly want to repair it and get back into service. So I've got remanufacture try. Okay, this is an eyesight test for everybody. I just realized I've got remanufacture on both slides with a different meaning. So that's me not checking my own cut and pasting controls. We can repurpose, and this is one of the things I'm very keen on, is taking products which have finished in one application. How do we reuse it for others? So a simple example would be taking pumps which are used on oil rigs. When the oil rigs are decommissioned, can we use those pumps by remanufacturing and even repurposing them for water? So a very similar application, still a fluid, but pumping water could be used for us, for the water companies. So it's just taking something and repurposing it, or taking the seats of aircraft and putting them into, reception areas, or even putting them onto ferries. How do you make use of things again? Similar use, but it is a repurposing in that respect. And we talked about recycling already, and the one we do not talk about is disposal, which is going to get less and less. Example of remanufactured products, Caterpillar. They will sell you a vehicle, and if the engine, say, fails, they'll give you a voucher. Your engine goes back to remanufacture, and you get either a new or remanufactured engine or component at a reduced price. So there's an attraction to do that kind of business, because Caterpillar will make a lot more money back on the part, and that part's failed, you get something back at a better value and with the same guarantee. As a company creating office furniture, this is Her Majesty's Revenue Office in Cardiff, where the furniture is all being remanufactured. This is also, to me, very dodgy, because normally you have a big desk. After it's been remanufactured, it's probably reduced by around 30%. And this is happening more and more as companies now are deciding we don't need office space or as much as before. Can we make our desks smaller? So there's a couple of companies in the US and quite a few in the UK who are going to these big organizations, take all the furniture, remanufacture it, reconfigure it, and sell it back. So I know Citibank in the US reduced the size of their tables by, I think, about 10%. And what it meant is they could increase the floor, the amount of people working on the floor. So that's what they did, and these companies focus on that. And office furniture is quite a popular one as well, because we can also talk about the carpets as well, which is an interesting one. We've all probably been involved in remanufacturing or taken parts, because for the last 20 odd years, printer cartridges, there's always these collection parts places, and the cartridges are then remanufactured and sold as remanufactured. You can go on to Amazon, and most of the cartridge providers are remanufactured cartridges. Tires, we used to call it retreading. It is remanufacturing. You don't buy a retreaded tire with a guarantee for 5 miles. You expect it to last a bit longer. So there is that kind of confidence put to these parts. And automotive has been very big on remanufacturing for a long time, going back to the 1940s. That was more for necessity than anything else. How do you extend the life of the product, because you can't get supplies, because, funny enough, there was a world war taking place. Other models we can look at are servitization, where if you think about the one which has got a lot of attention is automotive, because buying a car is perhaps the worst investment we do in our lives. unless you're living in the car, most of the time it's sitting idle, but people want their own cars. So the attraction of a servitization model, particularly in cities, like in London, you've got Zipcar, it makes sense because 95% of the time it's not doing anything, it's not adding value. So this is why we've seen a lot of companies coming out with around mobility and applying a servitization model where you pay for by the hour or pay by the distance you use it for. And there's various things we can look at under the servitization models. We can look from, moving away from selling to a customer to self-maintain, lease, or just a share. You can, it'll be like, we've always seen these timeshares. I mean, it's always, some people don't like the idea of buying a holiday apartment and sharing with others. Other people see the benefit in it. Why do I need an apartment in the sun for 52 weeks a year when I only have a few weeks holiday? So we're not new to this whole idea of sharing. It's just that it's going to proliferate more and more through our lives. And I already mentioned this, so the common one you see around almost every city is the bikes, because it's a convenient one and they always seem to be used mainly by tourists. When I spent most of my life working in Singapore, we had massive issues when the Chinese manufacturers came in, and because the bikes were seen as a throwaway commodity, people just rented it and dropped it anywhere. We actually had just like in Manchester, which had the same problem, the canals started getting filled up with very nice works of art, which turned out to be about 1,000 bikes dumped in there. So servitization models need a bit more education on the users as well, but they're getting there. And bikes is one you can see in Glasgow and most other places around the UK. Other models, like I've already mentioned, photocopiers, that is already a servitization model. You sign a leasing agreement to use it, and the parts are replaced where possible. It goes back and upgraded, and you get the same model back, but it's a slightly different model where it looks the same. And what they've done is they've changed a few of the modules to make it even more efficient, or just replace the ones which have failed. So the photocopying industry has been doing this since about the 1990s. The most famous one in this country we always talk about is Rolls-Royce. It's called Power by the Hour. It's a great model when the industry is doing well. Rolls-Royce didn't initiate this. It was their competitors. And to the airlines, it means I don't have to buy £20 million engines and put on my asset books. Instead, I just pay the company when I fly. Now that works brilliantly when the economy is doing well. Once lockdown hit, Rolls-Royce took a multi-billion-pound hit because there was no revenue coming in. So that's one of the downsides of, in certain industries of the servitization model is you've got to be using the service, otherwise there's no income. Interface is one of the first movers in the remanufacturing area, and they actually started saying, well, carpets are one of the worst things to do. You go to any landfill, you see people throwing carpets. When I go down to the tips, it's always carpets because the backing is hard to separate from the fibers. So Interface in the early 90s in Atlanta turned around and said, well, we can develop techniques to make it easier to strip, but then again, why are we selling carpets? Why don't we provide to the companies the carpet under a leasing agreement, and we can guarantee that every 1 or 2 years we will change it and give them a new carpet as part of the servitization model. And that's what's happened. And one which a lot of us may be familiar with, which we forget about, is the Kodak cameras. In the 1990s, before we had digital, you go on holiday, you've got your camera, you get one of these. When you finish with it, you send it back. The camera is remanufactured. Your film obviously gets developed and sent to you. And this was one of the, we're talking about hundreds of millions of these cameras going around doing this, being circulated in the 1990s until probably about 2002. So it was a very early attempt at doing this. But some people on this call will go, well, we're used to taking things back. We all remember the milk bottles. We used to return them, and we used to have the electric vehicles. Right, electric vehicles are something new. Well, we had the milk floats going down the street, returning these. Now, the question is whether glass bottles are better than plastic bottles. That requires a life cycle assessment. The UK government did one a few years ago talking about, should I have a cotton carrier bag or should I have a plastic one? And the plastic bag comes out better than the cotton. So not always a clear cut which is the best thing to use. But the idea of glass, we can recycle it, reuse it, we can put plants in it. Don't really want to do that with plastic. Look, coming closer to home, an example of a company which has adopted a circular economy approach is Aurora Sustainability. They've been working very closely with something which we got lots of in Scotland, which is whiskey distilleries, and there's more and more coming up. I don't see any distilleries closing these days. I always see new ones because there's a massive growth in demand, particularly from Asia. How do we take all that rubbish or the bio waste from whiskey distilleries and the heat? And they decided we could use it to produce mushrooms. So clear linkage between something which was going to be waste, one person's waste, another person's gold, and they've created a whole business around this. I hope those mushrooms smell of whiskey. That'll be fantastic. Something which I came across recently on adverts on TV, it's about the fact that we buy bikes and our kids grow up too fast. I think kids are growing faster now than ever before, and before long the bikes are going to be disposed of. So somebody's had a brilliant idea of making bikes a subscription, because until you're probably about 16 to 18 years old, you're constantly growing. So this is a company founded by two parents in London who obviously had the pain point themselves of having to buy new bikes, and said, why can't we look at this as a service? So you give us the bike back, we will give you a new one, and you're paying £4.49 per month. So you no longer own the bike, it's a service. We talk about IKEA. We have, I guess, all of us have frustrations with those famous, wonderful Allen bolts at the bottom, getting them to work, and over tightening, not making sure your product falls apart. But ultimately, IKEA is the world's biggest furniture provider, and it has been a pain in the backside for sustainability. It's never really been on top of it until the last 5 or 6 years, when they've decided we need to do a lot more. And now they're actively promoting designing circular products. On the website, they've got all the guides on circularity. They're pushing more and more to use renewable materials. If you go to IKEA in Glasgow or anywhere else, you'll find there's also a circular economy area as well. And then trying to test more and more opportunities on how to get parts back, products back, and recycle them, and if possible, find a second use for them or repurpose them. I've got the filter on, but behind me, I have a cupboard, which, if you remember for the kids, the Trofast, where you have all the bright colored plastic tubs going into a shelving, and it's for kids for the toys. What IKEA has now done is they put metal baskets in it to take what was upstairs in my son's room. It now goes into my office because it now looks like an adult product. Very simple, but a brilliant way to extend the life of a product from one application where I couldn't really have pink colored or brightly colored boxes behind me to reduce my credibility. But having wire baskets, it looks more professional. And that means something which I was going to throw away, I've now extended the life, and I've reused the plastic as well. So some very subtle things about our behaviors. IKEA has decided they can use that to extend products. And also at the same time, I'm buying new baskets, which of course means more income. So some smart ways of doing it. And IKEA is very conscious about working with the best in the class. They know they can't do everything, so they are reaching out to other organizations to do it. And so far, out of their range, which is absolutely massive, 9,500 have been assessed for circularity. It doesn't mean they can be, but at least they reviewed them and gone for the whole checklist to see if somebody can do. And they also offer spare parts to extend the life. 18 million spare parts have been provided just last year, just to people who is missing screw, or I need this and I'm going to throw it away unless you give it to me. So, a nice initiative, costs money, but IKEA is very, very rich. Examples, opportunities. I like to put beds up because as an academic, sometimes when I'm on the call to my students, I can see they switch the cameras off because I'm assuming they're all still in bed while trying to listen to my lectures, which is fine. But as a market, it's massive. 23 billion euros a year is the mattress market. It's also one of the biggest things you see on landfills is the whole mattresses, and we still sell it. We got about 2 to 15 kg of stuff which is can be recycled, but it's difficult. And my question would be, why are we selling mattresses? It could be opportunities to make it into a business where you actually provide as a service, and you actually understand people. You can put sensors on that, understand people's sleeping behavior, and design the mattresses to be more modular, so you could take bits out, replace it, and try to extend the life. Now, some mattresses have got fantastic lives, others haven't, but it is something which ends up in landfill. So it's a slow growth market if it's done for individuals, but for, say, hotels, it could be quite a commercial opportunity to get in there and provide the beds and the mattresses as a service as opposed to a product. Jennifer, quickly, I'm going to finish off because I'm watching the time, talked about Ellen MacArthur. There's wonderful tools there, and there's a whole procurement framework on the website to help guide companies from what you're trying to do, the strategy, to sourcing, and how you manage to actually get the right people into your supply chain. So Ellen MacArthur it's all free of charge. It's a foundation trying to promote the circular economy. And they also produce design guides as well, along with NMIS, which has done a lot of work in this area on how to actually get in this. So you got where to play, what's your target, how to win, how to operate, how to profit, and how can you show the business impact you're doing. It's got to be something good, as well as making money. It's got to be something for the economy, and what's the risk attached to it. And there's lots of other books out there. So these are all, when you get the slides, they're all clickable links as well to different sources. And cradle to cradle certification. So there's organizations out there which will certify your processes. Obviously, these are businesses, and they'll give you these logos to put on your products. And the EU has also got a lot of tools out there because they've been driving this for about 25 years, starting with the end of life of vehicles, moving on to other things as well. Now, we mentioned earlier about the Extend project. What we do is we go and help companies on a journey. One of the ways we do this is it's all fully funded, which is no way of saying free of charge, but we don't like to say free of charge to businesses. Fully funded sounds better. But we do these workshops where we actually help companies. And one of the starting points at the moment is your energy. What's your energy report? How can we give you a better understanding of how you can save energy? And then we look at other things like your greenhouse, your carbon footprint, and even help roadmap you or on your way to towards net zero. And all this is divided into different modules we call services, and they're all free of charge to SMEs in Scotland. So we have a team, well, I have a team of around 12 people who go out and deliver these. So we have the diagnostic, which also asks the question about the management of the organization. Is the SME really ready to do this? Do you have the right procedures and people in place? We can also look at your products and decide if it's something you can remanufacture. And this is something which NMIS is very strong at. So we can do that. We can also baseline your carbon footprint to give you that indication where you are now. Continuous professional development. If people in your team, in your company need training, we have Jennifer online who can actually help, as you said, deliver, or we can actually develop new courses if it's required. And there's a lot of funding available, more in Scotland than in the rest of the UK, for companies which are looking to invest. So something called a Low Carbon Manufacturing Challenge Fund will provide funds for you to invest in equipment which can actually demonstrate a reduction in your carbon footprint. And we've got other things there as well. So all these slides are available. Books, that's the book. The second one across the top is what Jen mentioned. The one on How Bad Are Bananas is by the brother of the guy who claims to have invented the internet. But it's very good. It talks about carbon footprints, and it actually tells you that bananas are not bad. So this is a collection of books. And I'll finish on that because I'm very conscious of the time. No time for questions probably, but thank you very much.
Thanks. Excuse me. Thanks, David. And thanks also, Jen, for your presentation earlier on there. And David, as always, bang on the money in terms of the timing. Love it. We don't have too many questions coming through the chat, so I'll just pick up a few comments before I move on to the question that I do have there. Obviously, a few people have been asking for copies of the presentations, and that's absolutely fine. We'll pull together a PDF and we'll send that out to everyone who's requested those presentations. You should see them dropping in over the next couple of days. As our marketing guys mentioned earlier on, the webinar's also been recorded and they'll be available on YouTube as well once we get that uploaded. So if anyone wants to revisit any of those presentations today, we can either give you the presentations or you can watch the video back. I'll jump on to some of these questions before we look to wrap up today. So first and foremost, a little bit of confusion between the three concepts, the sustainability, circular economy, and CSR. Could you please give a bit of a clarification on the differences, please?
I'll jump in on this one, and then David, you can elaborate on it, I'm sure. Just to say, so this is how I was trying to present sustainability as kind of the larger aim as a whole concept, and then there's items within there. So I had picked out sustainable development, but equally another one of those cogs is circular economy. And when we talk about CSR, my understanding of CSR is that it's pretty much being usurped by ESG now. Would you agree with that, David?
Yeah, I mean, CSR is corporate social responsibility, but now you're right, ESG is taken over, which is governance, but you're spot on with sustainability. We've only got one planet. I mean, that's the general top line. We haven't got a second planet. And circular economy is just one of the means. So sustainability covers a lot more. There's United Nations goals cover also about, gender equality, work equality, balanced lifestyle, fresh water, do you have access to it? So it covers a plethora of things. And then below that, circular economy is one of the mechanisms of how we start moving towards that. So Jen's particularly, smack on there. CSR, it was the buzzword about 10 years ago. Every company started corporate social responsibility, but that was really, I'm going out to help at a food bank, I'm doing this, and a lot of companies were just ticking the boxes, which is unfair. So, it didn't really provide the full story. ESG is going into a lot more detail. So yeah, I agree.
And thanks for the questions, by the way. It's lovely to kind of hear what people are thinking and kind of need more clarification on. So I'll put kind of CSR if I do this presentation again. I'll put that in there. Thank you.
Cool, thanks guys. Lots more comments coming in there. The people looking for our slides. So you've definitely sparked a bit of interest today. So yeah, we'll get those out as soon as we can. I'm just checking to see if there are any other questions in amongst those. Got one question here there from Kirsty. I'm just noticing, did I hear correctly that there are carbon benefits of using offshore resource as opposed to
other way around,
using onshore resource as opposed to offshore? Sorry. And could you give some specific examples, please?
I don't think there's any benefit between the two. I think it's just whether you're it's a renewable energy source. I think that's where we got to the moment. So it's as long as it's renewable, but that's under your scope 2. So your scope 1 is yourself, your energy, how much energy you're using, can you reduce your energy footprint? Scope 2 is, are you using renewables? So it could be offshore, onshore wind, it could be hydrogen, green hydrogen, it could be hydropower, as long as it's not fossil fuels. Even nuclear is green, but we're not supposed to say that too much in Scotland. So really, no, there's not much difference at the moment. The only thing I can think going forward, maybe tariffs. If it's financially, we are investing a lot in offshore. The reason is we can produce bigger wind turbines and hopefully get more efficient. But at the same time, we've got so many, 5,000 onshore turbines as well, which is worrying if you got cheap. Apparently, they do make lots of noise.
Yeah, thanks again, guys. I think that's all the questions that I'm seeing in the chat there. And based on the timing at the moment, I think we'll look to wrap things up as soon as we can now, since we're just a few minutes over. So thanks again, everybody, for joining us today. We hope to see you joining us for our next webinar on the 11th of January, once all the festivities of Christmas and New Year are past. So we hope to see you there. And thanks again to our presenters today. So thanks, David, and thanks, Jennifer. And I'll pass you back to Debbie and the marketing team.